to say, the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage MP. I love saying the MP bit. Nigel, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Look, I don't want to get bogged down on this, but I got to ask you about this Gregg Wallace story, because a lot of people are saying this is a free speech story. This is a bunch of, as he says, middle-class women of a certain age, basically not being able to take a laugh, not enjoying banter. What's the big deal? Other people saying, look, boorish behaviour, BBC should have stepped in sooner. Where do you stand?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I mean, clearly, boorish behaviour seems undeniable. He perhaps had a way of talking and behaving that we would call outdated, to say the very least. But his pushback strikes me as being somewhat catastrophic. It does show a certain arrogance, a certain incomprehension that he might have behaved badly. So I think he's dug himself an even deeper hole than he was in before.
OK, I'm thinking a lot of people say, oh, people allowed a bit of banter. You love a bit of banter. I've never known you behave inappropriately with any women I see around in terms of making a woman feel uncomfortable like that.
No. I mean, look, as I say, I wasn't defending his behaviour. I was just saying people of a certain age who went to work 40 years ago, it was a bit like that in the workplace. Yep. And it was pretty unpleasant for women. You're not old enough, Julia, of course, to remember. I know that. But, as I say, he seems to show no remorse whatsoever when clearly he has offended an awful lot of people. What is surprising is that the BBC didn't step in earlier and say, look, this is inappropriate, out of date. It really is actually genuinely upsetting some people. Please change your behaviour. And it seems that no one did that, which I do find, particularly in the modern world, a bit odd. OK, well, let's move on. Let's talk about what we don't find a bit odd, totally expected. The latest migrant numbers this morning. We're expected to have official confirmation that we have seen more than 20,000 Channel migrants crossing on small boats since July the 5th, when Keir Starmer took over as Prime Minister. He said he was going to smash the gangs, he was going to get on top of this, abandon the Rwanda policy. We know that more people come in the summer months than come in winter months. So is this to be expected, or do you think that actually this is a big Labour fail? Well, what's interesting isn't just the 20,000 number, 20,000 nearly all young men who come from completely different cultures, and many of whom will go straight into criminality. Sorry, but that's the brutal truth. The other numbers are interesting. Another 6,000 have gone into hotels since the 5th of July, and returns, quarter three returns of those that are not allowed to stay here is down even from last year. So by every measure, the Labour government are failing. Smashing the gangs will not work because the incentives are so big. When a gang can make €2 million during a calm week in the summer or autumn, it doesn't matter what you do. You can put people in prison. You can threaten them with the death penalty. More people will come forward because there's so much money involved. And so between them and the Conservatives, there is a total failure to understand. The only deterrent, and by the way, I said this, Julia, 4 years ago, when I went out into the Channel to try and highlight this issue.
Remember this,
the only deterrent is deportation. And deportation will not happen all the while the European Convention on Human Rights is written into UK law and used by judges. And Starmer's second speech as Prime Minister was how much he likes the ECHR and why we would never leave. And the Conservatives had a choice between Robert Jenrick, who was, well, it was like a Nigel Farage tribute act, really. But hey, I did agree with what he was saying. And the Conservatives have opted for a leader that doesn't want to leave. So,
Kemi Badenoch has said only last week in her first big policy speech, made it about migration. We have to stop being squeamish about it. She said that leaving the European Convention on Human Rights wasn't even the most radical thing that they might have to do.
I shall do such things. They shall be the terrors of the earth. Yes, I know. It's nonsense. She's a continuity candidate. Nothing's going to change. And I'm sorry to say that this is a national security crisis. There are people coming in here with ill intent towards our country. Of that, I've absolutely no doubt. Frankly, it's calamitous.
Let me also ask you about something that certainly was calamitous for many of us over recent years, and that was lockdown policies pushed largely by organisations like the World Health Organization and others, in complete breach of all previous pandemic planning, indeed our own pandemic plan. You and I were both people who, after supporting the beginning of the first lockdown, had major concerns against this being an evidence policy. There's a lot of concern that the World Health Organization is moving towards being a body, and previous government, this government, where basically they take over all control of any pandemic planning in the future, taking all that control and power away, even from national governments who are at least in some way minimally accountable to us people. We know that Donald Trump has got big issues with a lot of those big organisations like the World Health Organization. Now, you are part of a sort of a body sort of looking at basically what's called the Bell Review, looking to either reform or possibly even replace the World Health Organization. And they're launching today. Tell us what that's about and what the plan is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm involved with an organisation called Action on World Health. And that is because we are so alarmed at what happened with lockdowns, with the medical failures, with vaccine mandates, with the loss of individual liberty, but now national sovereignty as well. The World Health Organization, which is heavily funded by the communist Chinese, and which covered up at the start of the pandemic the true cause of it, got everything wrong all the way through. They are now pushing for what they call a global pandemic treaty. They tried to get it through the General Assembly of the WHO this year and failed. They're going to come back next year for more. The British government, when they're asked about this, deny the truth, which is, if we sign this treaty, we give them the power to tell us to lock down. We give them the power to tell us which drugs may be appropriate or not. We give them the power to say a certain percentage of our vaccines might need to go to Africa or somewhere else. That is an unacceptable loss of sovereignty anyway, and to give it to a group like this, which is clearly heavily politically influenced by Bill Gates, the Chinese communists, and goodness knows who, that is unaccountable in every way, is wrong. And yet, just 2 weeks ago, the Labour government announced we're giving them another £310 million of British taxpayers' money to a failed organisation. Now, Trump coming in to the White House... I
was just going to ask you about this, yes.
Yeah. So Trump coming into the White House, his new medical team are totally opposed to vaccine mandates in principle, and they absolutely would not want lockdowns of any kind occurring, let alone those imposed by a treaty from the World Health Organization. So Dr. David Bell, on our behalf, with 8 other medical professionals, is doing a full review into this, how much money we give the World Health Organization, and why, using Trump's government as the lever, we need to press for radical reform of the World Health Organization, or we leave it and start something else. And I think this really matters. I mean, this is Brexit Britain. We voted to be a sovereign country. We cannot be a sovereign country if we're part of the World Health Organization with its plans.
Obviously, you've got very close ties with Donald Trump. There's lots of talk about what possible role you could have in helping Britain, especially if we faced, along with Mexico and Canada and China and possibly the EU, tariffs, and whether you would step in. Keir Starmer, he dashed at the end of the division on the assisted dying bill on Friday, dashed up the stairs to talk to you in the House of Commons chamber, all on camera. First of all, what did he say to you? And second of all, would you actually take any job within this government as an envoy, as someone who could provide liaison with Donald Trump, your good friend?
Well, look, he came across the chamber and we had a good laugh about a couple of things. And
Come
then
on, tell us what. I can't imagine you having much in common with Keir Starmer.
Well, he did tell a joke at my expense at PMQs the other day, and I did sort of reciprocate. Look, let me be absolutely frank. I've said this before, but I'll make it very clear to your viewers and listeners this morning that I am connected not just through friendship to Donald Trump, but half of the incoming cabinet in America are known to me. In fact, some of them are friends. Some of them are people I speak to regularly. So if I can be a bridge between a government that set itself at odds with Trump in so many ways, whether it's the Chagos Island surrender and the worries over the military base on Diego Garcia, whether it's this stated aim to get closer to the European Union, Whatever it may be, whether it's David Lammy's comments about Donald Trump, in lots and lots of areas, we have a potential problem. America is our biggest country trading partner in the world. It's a massive investor in Britain, and they've always wanted to do a free trade deal with us. Now, I think we can not only just avoid the tariffs that are coming in, but I think we can, sector by sector, whether it's they buy our Scotch whiskey and we buy their bourbon or whatever it is, through to financial services, I think we can do even better than just not being hit by Trump tariffs. And if I can help through interpersonal relationships to sort of smooth the way, I would do so not because I'm a supporter of the Labour government, but because it's in our national interest.
Very interesting. Can I also ask you actually about what's going on with the current president? In the news, we woke up this morning to the news that despite saying repeatedly he would never do this, the White House spokespeople saying repeatedly he would never do this, the outgoing president, Joe Biden, has decided to offer a pardon to his son, Hunter Biden. He's facing sentencing on 2 charges involving tax evasion and lying on his gun licence form because he was a drug addict at the time. He faced up to 25 years in prison. Unlikely he was ever going to get that. Yeah. But he's given him a pardon going back a whole 10 years. Is it reasonable for him to expect, well, A, for him to do that, and B, for him to expect, as it would appear he does, some sort of judicial retribution on his family from the incoming President Trump?
Well, the first thing to say is that Donald Trump is not vindictive in the same way that the Democrats are. He's actually a very forgiving man.
Lock her up. Isn't vindictive?
Yeah, that was campaigning, and, that was a long time ago. He is not, this administration is not going to waste its time on vindictiveness. What Biden has done is, of course, deeply hypocritical, because he says that the charges against my son were political. Well, what have they done to Donald Trump? What has the Department of Justice done to Donald Trump on a whole variety of charges, many of them for things that have never been crimes in previous American history? So it's deeply hypocritical. And for Hunter Biden to be pardoned for anything he might have done for the last 11 years is truly astonishing. But it tells you all you need to know. And thank goodness the Democrats are on the way out. We've got a refreshing, exciting new president with a new team coming in just a few weeks' time.
Do you think that Donald Trump and what he does in America, whether it's about tackling woke madness, whether it's about tackling net zero madness and other issues, now there's a lot of stuff with him I massively disagree on, but on those 2 issues, certainly with him. Do you think that any of that is going to hit us downstream? Is that going to change what happens here in Britain?
Oh, everything that happens in America happens here a little bit later. I mean, whether it's music or culture or film or business practices or even woke, which of course started in America and spread to us and interestingly, hasn't gone to France and Germany in quite the same way. Look, I think there is a massive political sea change that is going on. It's being driven by Gen Z. It is the sort of 18 to 30-year-olds who are looking at the world very differently. And yeah, I'm very confident. Not everything, we're not identical, but many of the things that Trump is trying to do will become mainstream views in this country. And how interesting to see that Trump's personal popularity in Britain, despite a constantly negative media, is now higher than that of Keir Starmer's. And I think even commentators, Julia, like you, will be changing your tune as this second Trump administration.
No, I said if it were given the choice, he's the candidate I would have voted for. I said that many times on this show before the election. Just finally, he's obviously a big supporter, is financially as well, is Elon Musk. Owner of SpaceX and X, as we still know as Twitter. He gave huge amounts of money. He's talking about giving you, apparently, $100 million to help Reform UK win the next gen election. Now, of course, he's a foreign national, but of course he has companies in Britain, so he could funnel it legally through a company here. First, would you welcome his money? And second, would that be enough to help you win the next election?
I don't know anything about this story at all. Nothing whatsoever. It's a Sunday Times story. Somebody has said something to someone. I've had no indication of this whatsoever.
Would you take the money if it was offered?
We'd take legal money if it was offered to us. Of course we would, yeah. When you think that the big party machines raise tens of millions every year, and we are a little bit like David with a small stone in a sling, of course, we need money as a party, of course we do. But whether there's any truth in this story, I have honestly got no idea.
OK, always good to talk to you. Nigel Farage, covered a lot of ground there, leader of Reform UK. Thank you for that. Sam Armstrong, you had a little bit of a dig at the Tories. Now, you actually were helping on Robert Jenrick's campaign. He said he was just a tribute act, but he thinks Kemi Badenoch is just a continuity candidate.
Well, look, I think the Tory party have a serious job to do in bringing home 20% of voters who have gone over to Reform. I don't think it's all necessarily straight from the Tories over, but broadly speaking, there are now 45% of the British electorate that are sitting between either the Conservative Party or the Reform Party. If that split continues, in fact, if the Reform vote is over 10% at the time of the next election, Kemi Badenoch will not be forming the next government of this country. So,
hence her speaking about things like migration in her big speech last week.
Absolutely. But look at those numbers we saw last week. 1 million people came net migration in a single year to this country. They used to promise to get it down to tens of thousands. They got it.
As someone pointed out to me, it is in the tens of thousands, just a lot of tens.
Well, look, they said they would get it from the 6 figures down to the 5 figures. In fact, they got it up to 7 figures. So she's got a long journey and trust to go.
Those are the only ones we know about.